Hi everyone, and welcome to today's session of Bimco Bytes on the Toposolid tool in Revit. We'll be looking at three methods of creating toposolids. We'll be looking at phasing and graded regions and enabling cut and fill calculations for toposolids. We'll also be looking at creating slabs and footings and some methods of shaping toposolids with points. Okay, so the first method of toposolid creation that we'll look at today is what's called creating the toposolid by sketch. In this circumstance, we'd only go about doing this if we didn't have any other 3D information to create the toposolid from. So what we would do in this circumstance is import our survey, which I've done here already, and just import the survey in 2D. And then we would go up to the Toposolid tool, which is located on the Massing and Site tab, click on Toposolid, and go Create from Sketch. Now, the first thing we need to do is put a boundary of the Toposolid down. So the boundary will need to be adjusted later, but in the first instance, you just want to get roughly the boundary of the site that you want to create the Toposolid for, but just a little bit outside of the boundary, just to give you some breathing room. So once you've created the Toposolid, it will just sort of look like a little floor like this. And the first thing that we need to do in order to change or in order to input the levels of the Toposolid is to start adding some points. So what we do in that case is that we go modify sub-elements. Now, when you click on, we'll just go out of that for a second. When you click on the Toposolid here, this at the moment is a flat sheet. Basically, we'll just have a quick look just so you can visualize that. This is the Toposolid that I'm making here. Okay, so when we click on add points, that also activates the modify sub-elements tool. Now, what we need to do in this circumstance here is start adding points manually based on these nominated survey points. Now you can see here that the point here is already at 139. And this is in millimeters, by the way, 13900. Now the reason why that is because I've created this Toposolid at the site ground level for the time being. Now it ultimately doesn't matter where you create the Toposolid. You can create it at the ground floor level, but in the end, the survey points that we're going to be putting in are going to be referencing what we choose the elevation base to be registered as here. Now, what you should do is choose an elevation base based on a point with an elevation of 0. So that is the datum. So in this case, I've chosen the survey point. So what I would do is with my elevation base selected to survey point, I would click on the absolute setting for adding points, and then I would need to type in manually the point that I want to create, 139130 in millimeters. And you can see that's created a point there. And then for the next point that I want to add, I would need to type that new point in again, 139 or 138,430. Now, as you can see, this is quite a time-consuming calculation, or quite a time-consuming process. So it's something that we want to avoid if we can do it. The next method that we're going to look at is creating by face. So in this particular circumstance, we look in, let me just pop into here. Now, creating a Toposolid by face allows you to draw a form as an in-place mass. So drawn this already here. You can see here it's in the mass category, and that allows you to do free form sort of site elements. So in order to create Toposolid by base, after we've created our mass, we click on Massing and Site tab, go to Toposolid, and then we're enabled to select multiple faces. So I'm going to select the top here, and it will allow you to select other faces as well. Now, if this mass form here goes underneath the other Toposolid face, it won't actually allow you to generate it. But once you've selected the faces you'd like to create the Toposolid on, you just click on Create Toposolid. Now, this one's probably more useful for some very rare circumstances where you've got unusual forms on your site, but it's a feature there that you can use. Now, the most preferred method of creating a Toposolid is to create from import. Now, ideally, when you get your survey done, you should always request for a 3D surface file, and that will be a set of that'll be a CAD file that looks a bit like this, which takes those surveyed points and triangulates them in 3 dimensions. Now, most surveyors will usually be able to provide this if they haven't already in their survey information that they've given you. So in order to create Toposolid from an import, what we first need to do is we insert the 3D CAD file in. Sometimes these two will be combined together, but I've just split them up here to make it a little bit clearer. So we insert the CAD file in 3D. It's the only time that we insert a CAD file in 3D. And then going into a 3D existing view, so I've got this in the existing phase, you can see here. Then I would go up to select Toposolid, create from import. Now it's important to know, just before I pop onto that, it's important to make sure that you understand what layers in this CAD file that you are creating from the import. So what we really want to do is make sure that we're just creating the Toposolid from this mesh. You can see here the surveyor's also given us some contour data. Now this contour data is interpolated between real surveyed points, which are triangulated here. So we want to make sure that we investigate the CAD file either in AutoCAD, or we can use our query tool just to make sure we know what these layers are called. So the contours, for example, are called contour 1 surface, that one is. And then the triangulated layer that we've got here is called DTM in this case. So when we go to the Create Toposolid from Import tool, we have a selection here to say Create from CAD, which is generally the one that you'll be using. And then we click on the CAD file, and then it'll ask us which layers we want to create the Toposolid from. So we just want to make sure we just use that triangulated layer. Okay, and then I'm going to go okay, and then that will generate the Toposolid. Now, usually in this case, we don't need this 3D CAD file anymore. So we would usually just either remove that from the file or just unload it. In this particular circumstance, I'm just going to switch it off just in case we need to see it again. So there's our Toposolid, and you can see how much quicker that is to make by entering in points and drawing it in manually. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is understand how we can start putting a building on this site and changing the form of the topography. It's usually always important to make sure that we keep a copy of the existing topography for our existing condition plans, and then have a new topography which will have the final building on it. Now, this is where there's some interesting concepts that you might not be aware of. So when Revit has two different topographies in the same place but in different phases, it enables a feature called cut and fill calculations. So, for example, these topographies here, this one is in the existing phase here. And then if I go into my new phase, I can see here that I've done some things in here. So the topography is now changed. Now, because these two topographies are in different phases in the same place, that's enabled this feature here, net cut and fill and cut and some other information. Now, in order to do that, it can be as simple as taking this topography here, going Control C, making it demolished in new construction, going into the new construction view. I'll go and hide that. And then going up to our modify tool and going paste align to same place. And now I've got a new topography, which if I then change, if I were to change a point in here, let's start, I'll explain some of this later, but we'll change a few things here. You can see here, we've now got this cut and fill calculations being generated here. Now, there's another way to do this, which is a little bit more elegant, and that's called the graded region tool. And that effectively does the process that I've just done there. So we're going to have a quick look at that. So when you create a topography, it won't be set to demolish in new construction. It will just be not set to demolish. Now, in order to create a graded region, or effectively an existing version of the topography and a new version of the topography, what we do is we go into a new plan. So this is now in new phase. And we go up to our massing and site tab and click on graded region. And it gives us this option, create the topography exactly like the existing one, or we can also create the topography based on perimeter points only, so the internal topography is smoothed out. I'm going to do that just to sort of show what happens here, because that topography is now going to be different. So what this has done here, it's actually created a new version of the topography, which is created in new construction. And if we look back at our existing topography now, you can see this is now being changed to demolish in new construction. So you can see that the graded region tool is the same as copying and pasting a copy of the topography in the two phases. But it also now is generating net cut and fill values, and these can be scheduled. So the next thing that we'll look at is how to create footings. Okay, so typically when you draw a floor in, and I've just done this by using the typical floor tool, doesn't have to be anything particularly special. What it would do is it would be buried within the topo surface like that. Now, in order to cut this out of the Toposolid, what we would do is we would click on the Toposolid, and then we will see here that there's a tool here called Excavate, and by clicking on that, it tells the Toposolid that is a foundational floor slab, and we can tick it on like that. Now, looking through the building here, we can see here that it's not cutting through these footings. So we do the same procedure. We click on the Toposolid, click on Excavate, and there we go. And we'll see that it's now cut that out of the building. Now, clicking on the Toposolid, we can see here we're now generating these new cut and fill values, And if we click on this button here, we can see here that we've even got some information on what the individual parts of the footing system are excavating. So that can just be useful if you're needing to understand what's going on where. Okay, so the next part of working with Toposolids is once you've created your new topography and made sure that your existing topography is being demolished in the new phase, we sometimes will need to tidy up some of these parts here. So in order to start changing various different points on the topography, we have a number of different options. So when we click on it here, we can see we saw that there was the add point tool before, but there's a couple of other options here. Now, absolute obviously is where we can just simply put a point in that we know. Now, the next option that we have though here is to add a point along the surface. Now, what this will do is that you can see here the topography is kind of working a little bit like a spot elevation. So if I just add a point there, it's actually going to add a point where it is on the topo surface, and that can actually just help with smoothing things out a little bit. Now, the next add point function that we can have is this one that's called snap XYZ. And this allows us to snap topography to building elements. So we can see here, if I wanted to take that piece of topography up to there, I can snap that to there, and then that will actually grade the topography up to the building element like this. And that's it will be an important feature for creating crossovers. Now, the more points you add, the smoother it can get, but obviously can take a bit of extra time.